What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHocks42 on the internet, and today we are looking at a very special deck. This is a deck built around Dollhouse of Horrors and Scute Swarm. But before we dive into the full deck tech, I'd like to thank you for tuning in, and also, if you enjoy this video, please don't hesitate to like and subscribe. As of this recording, I'm in the process of trying to monetize this channel, and those actually help feed the algorithm, and it goes a long way. So thank you so much for considering that. Now let's get into the deck. So, the Dollhouse of Horrors is a special card that this deck is built around that says it's an artifact for 5 that pay 1, tap, exile a creature card, create a token that's a copy of the exiled card, except it's a 0/0 construct artifact in addition to its other types, and this creature gets +1/+1 for each construct you control. It gains haste until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. So this is a 6-drop, let's be honest. The chances of us actually playing out Dollhouse of Horrors on 5 and just letting it sit. Now, that said, I say this, and I'm sure when we get into the gameplay, I'm going to do just that because our setup is such that it just makes the most sense. But in general, what we want to be doing is playing this out and activating it immediately, because that's the joy of artifacts. They don't have summoning sickness. So with Dollhouse of Horrors, we have a number of options to go after. But the interesting thing is, because the creature that comes out has 0, its stat line is set, the really big creatures that we might be interested in reanimating in other situations don't really work here. So we're looking for creatures with cool effects. Now, the one that immediately came to mind when I looked at this card is Scute Swarm. The way that Scute Swarm works, whenever land enters the battlefield under control, you create a 1/1 green insect creature token. But it gets better. If you control 6 or more lands, you create a token that's a copy of Scute Swarm instead. And when Scute Swarm is brought back as a construct, the copies that you make will also be constructs. Note the wording on Dollhouse of Horror. This creature gets +1/+1 for each construct you control. So if we control 2 Scute structs, as you will, Scute constructs, they're each 2 2s. If we control 3, they're all 3 3s, etc., etc., etc. So what we do is we reanimate Scute Swarm and then hit our land drop for turn. So what we're trying to do is get to turn 5 or turn 6, assuming we have some ramp in play, which we have access to, and throw the Dollhouse of Horrors down, activate it, pull a Scute Swarm back, hit our land drop. If we're really lucky, that land drop is going to be an Evolving Wilds. Crack it immediately, assuming it's an Evolving Wilds, and then all of a sudden we just go off from there, and just sheer profit, if you will. So that's the goal. One of the problems with this deck that I've found is that when the engine pops, the opponents have a tendency to scoop very quickly. So you don't really get too much time to play with the toys, because it becomes very apparent very fast. You either have a board wipe to deal with this, or you don't, and I win. And that's about how it plays. So that's pretty darn fantastic. Now, what do we do to set this up? We have a couple of things. We have Prosperous Innkeeper for a few reasons. One, it gives us the treasure token, which helps ramp us into our combo a little bit early, which is fantastic. Additionally, because we have a lot of creature tokens entering the battlefield, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. We love this. As the Scutes are coming into play, we're also gaining life. Now, we don't have any other life gain synergies. This is purely to buff our life totals to keep us alive. That's actually very handy. The other cool thing about this deck, because we need to get Scute Swarm into our graveyard, we can actually play Scute Swarm out earlier and use it as a chump blocker in a way that our opponent oftentimes doesn't think we're willing to do. But because, if we have access to the Dollhouse, that's an option. Now, that said, Scute Swarm can take over a game on its own, even if we don't get the Dollhouse of Horror in play. So that's another possibility. Anyway, so we have Prosperous Innkeeper here. Both of its abilities are relevant. Both of its abilities help us achieve our end goal. We also have Witherbloom Command. This is in here for one very specific reason. Its first ability. Target player mills 3 cards, then you return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. We want to mill as much as we possibly can, so we mill ourselves and then pull a land back to our hand. This ensures that we hit our 3rd land drop, as well as fills our graveyard with some stuff, which is great. We also have the other modes: destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with a mana value of 2 or less. That can kill Ranger class, it can kill Cleric class, it can also knock out portable holes to get some of our stuff back. It can do some really cool things. And target creature gets -3/-1 until end of turn. Depending on how our opponent played it, this could knock out Luminarch Aspirants. It can deal with Intrepid Adversaries if they're played early. There are a lot of 1 toughness creatures. Elite Spellbinder, I don't know why I'm picking on mono white, but they have a lot of 1 toughness creatures, so, well, this can deal with those. And then target opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life. That's not bad. So there, even at 2, if there's nothing else, if there are no targets on the field, you still get the mill, you hit a land, and you get to nug your opponent for 2 and gain a little bit of life. So there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to build a budget version of this deck, you could replace Witherbloom Command with Mulch, and it would work very nicely because it accomplishes a very similar goal. At the end of the day, it will mill you and put lands in your hand. You could actually make an argument that Mulch is actually better than Witherbloom Command, but I like Witherbloom Command in this context. We also have Meathook Massacre. There is nothing that deals with a board of small creatures better than Meathook Massacre in Standard right now, and that's why it's here. The other thing is this can be an alternate win condition for us if we have a ton of Scutes on the board and they have some way to prevent combat damage, like if they have Volkmira, for example, the shield, or another... if they have a wide board and can prevent enough, can block enough of our little 1/1 Scutes, we can just throw in Meathook Massacre, wipe our entire board, and just ping them dead, dead to the face. Which is nice. So that's another great way to do it. So Meathook Massacre serves a couple of functions. Its primary function in the deck, though, is to deal with pesky aggro players early on. Just deal with the aggro decks early while we're setting up our combo. So it's just nothing does it better. Old Stickfingers. I love Old Stickfingers. I think this card is fantastic. The strategic mill that only puts creature cards into your graveyard is very, very useful. Great way to get Scutes into our graveyard, as well as other targets we can reanimate with the Dollhouse, one of which being the Prosperous Innkeeper, for example. Could be quite useful. And we have some other targets for the Dollhouse as well that we'll get to in a little bit. Dryad's Revival. We're milling ourselves a lot, and we're putting a ton of stuff into our graveyard. The purpose of Dryad's Revival here is... to take advantage of, if we mill our Dollhouse, for example, or we mill out, a Celestus or an Old Rutstein, another card that is a piece of our setup engine that we could use, Dryad's Revival is a great way to get it back. Also, in the late game, if we have a Scute going off, we can actually use Dryad's Revival to grab an Evolving Wilds or Field of Ruin out of our graveyard to hit some additional land drop triggers. So Dryad's Revival is very useful. Other alternatives for this card would be Balaged Recovery. If you have that in your collection, you could also use that. Or you could actually do without this, because this is for emergencies. We definitely don't want to be leaning on Dryad's Revival, but because it has flashback, we can also use it late in the game to pull relevant cards out of our graveyard if we mill it, which is kind of nice. So I like Dryad's Revival quite a bit, but it's not a critical piece of the game plan. Scute Swarm, we talked about that. Scute Swarm makes this whole deck work. Old Rutstein. When Old Rutstein enters the battlefield or at the beginning of your upkeep, you mill a card. If a land card is milled this way, create a treasure token. If a creature card is milled this way, create a 1/1 insect creature token. And if a non-creature, non-land card is milled this way, create a blood token. All 3 of those tokens are relevant. The insect token provides us chump blockers. Treasure ramps us into our strategy, and the blood tokens allow us to put big things in our graveyard that we can pull back later and help us dig into our deck to get to our combo. And Rutstein also is a 1/4 for 3. Putting 4 toughness on the board, all of a sudden, again, there are a lot of aggro decks running around out there right now. That's a great way to help kind of disrupt that and slow that plan down a little bit. And it is going to be pumping out insect creature tokens if we're successful in loading our graveyard. And at the end of the day, first things first, it loads our graveyard. That's really what we need. And so Old Rutstein, in addition to Old Stickfingers, those two go together great. They do some really phenomenal work. Also, Old Rutstein is another great target for the Dollhouse. If we already have our Scute struct going, our Scute construct, if that's already moving and we already have that engine online, we can pull up an Old Rutstein and just keep filling our graveyard with even more goodies and getting more value off of said goodies going into our graveyard. And it puts an additional construct on the board that has haste, fun fact. So Old Rutstein is another great creature target. I'm never mad to see Old Rutstein hit the graveyard, but I really want it in play. We also have the Celestus for a couple of key reasons. It ramps us from 3 to 5 nicely. So if we hit this on turn 3, we can then immediately on turn 4, assuming we hit our land drops, drop 5 drops, such as the Dollhouse. So that's ultimately really fantastic. But the other major thing it does is allows us to draw a card and discard a card. So it allows us to put the Scute Swarm into our graveyard that way if we don't want to go through the battlefield for any reason. So that's an option. In general, I think the Celestus is a phenomenal card. Additionally, it operates as a mana sink late in the game. If you have nothing else to do, if you run out of gas, you can pay 3, tap it, switch it from day to night or night to day, gain a life, draw a card, discard a card. So you can mill yourself for 1, but you have some card selection over it, assuming you have cards in your hand. So if you don't like the card you drew, you can just pay 3, dump it, and try again. You do have to spend some mana to do so, because not only do you have to pay 3, you also have to tap the Celestus, which is a mana rock. So it effectively costs 4 to take advantage of that ability. But I've had a number of games where late in the game that was relevant, and I ended up digging into the thing I needed to win. So it is possible. So in general, I think the Celestus is a great way to help fill our yard, and it's also really solid ramp. But at the end of the day, there are only 2 in the deck because while they're good, they're not amazing, because we also have enough other stuff to help fill our graveyard in Witherbloom Command, Old Rutstein, and Old Stickfingers, to name a few, that we don't necessarily need the Celestus, but it's a solid option. All right, we also have Glorious Sunrise in here. Now, this is here for a couple of options, couple of reasons. Being able to gain 3 life for 5 is relevant, so that's something. Additionally, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample until end of turn. That's the main mode. This is the way that if our opponent has enough blockers to deal with our Scute constructs, we ensure that they are too big and they all have trample. That way, if they are able to block them, they will not block enough damage from them. That's ultimately the goal. We also have the option to give one of our lands the ability to tap for 3 green mana, so it basically adds 2 mana to our mana pool in our post-combat main phase, so that's nice. And we can also draw cards if we have a big enough creature on board. So Glorious Sunrise is just value. It's just a really good value, and we also have Storm the Festival in here, and Glorious Sunrise is a potential target for Storm the Festival. So speaking of potential targets for Storm the Festival, we also have Wrenn and Seven. This is another phenomenal way to fill our yard. If we're going up against aggro, we can create the Tree Folk token. The Tree Folk token is a good creature. It just puts a body on board that our opponent immediately has to deal with, and it has reach. That's nice, but that's not the main reason that Wrenn is here. The main reason Wrenn is here is for that +1. You reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put all land cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, mulch on a +1. It's absolutely fantastic, and if you haven't played with Wrenn, I highly recommend playing it, and in this deck specifically, a lot of the time we'll throw Wrenn on 5 and immediately +1. We don't worry about the 0 or the -3. The main goal, fill the yard, put lands in our hand, because we need both of those things to work if the engine is online. And so Wrenn is ultimately, what we want Wrenn to be is 2 mulches. If we can get 2 +1s out of Wrenn, they did their job. Awesome. If we can get additional value out of that, perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, we want to fill our yard and put lands in our hand. That's Wrenn's main job. And if the Tree Folk token is going to help protect Wrenn and allow us to do that a little bit more, great. All right. And then finally, last card that's not in the mana base is the Ancient Greenwarden. This is pretty fantastic. You can play lands from your graveyard. That alone right there is worth the price of admission. So this is a 5/7 reacher for 6 that allows us to pull lands out of our graveyard. If we crack an Evolving Wilds in the early game, this gives us an Evolving Wilds late in the game. And on top of that, it gives us an Evolving Wilds as many times as we want, which is fantastic. Additionally, if a land triggering ability causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Well, that means that Scute Swarms, if we make a copy of Scute Swarm, we create 2 copies of Scute Swarm. Rad. That's exactly what we're looking for. Fantastic. So being able to create multiple copies of Scute Swarm faster than we would otherwise is exactly what we want to be doing. So Ancient Greenwarden allows us to do that. Also, Ancient Greenwarden is a phenomenal target for the Dollhouse, because the fact that it's a 5/7 with reach is really, really nice. If we can hardcast this from hand, dope. I'm not mad at it. I'm very happy that we have it. If, however, we just have a Scute Swarm online, whether it's a regular Scute Swarm or a construct Scute Swarm, if we have it online and we just need to hit additional lands, we can use the Dollhouse of Horror to pull an Ancient Greenwarden that we milled earlier out of our graveyard into play, and then immediately start hitting our lands from our graveyard. So that's fantastic. We definitely want to take advantage of that. And I went through a couple of iterations of this deck, some of which were leveraging Cultivator Colossus, and others were leveraging Ancient Greenwarden. And I found, because of the synergies with Greenwarden and Scute Swarm specifically, those 2 cards worked perfectly together, and the deck actually wins significantly more when Greenwarden is in here rather than Cultivator Colossus, which is another one that you may consider. It could be fun to play for sure. If you have it in your collection, why not give it a shot? But in my experience, Ancient Greenwarden is the mythic that really ties the room together, if you will. Now, our mana base is pretty straightforward. We've got swamps, we've got forests, we have 4 pathways, 4 Deathcap Glades, the slow lands. Then we also have 3 Field of Ruin to deal with all those pesky man lands and hit additional triggers off of our Scute Swarm. But we also have 4 Evolving Wilds. Again, I've mentioned it a couple of times. Evolving Wilds is very, very important when you are hitting Scute Swarms. So in order to pop Scute Swarm and get additional value, Evolving Wilds goes a long way. As anyone who's played any Landfall Synergy can tell you, it's a phenomenal card. Now, would I rather that be Fabled Passage? Yes, absolutely. Is Fabled Passage legal in Standard? Nope. So here we are with Evolving Wilds. And I'm not mad at it. It does the job, and it does it quite well. So that's the deck. I'm calling this the House of Scute. Scute House of Horrors, House of the Rising Scute, all acceptable names as well. But at the end of the day, Dollhouse of Horrors and Scute Swarm it's really what it's all about. That's the engine that drives this whole thing. So let's jump out onto the ladder and let's see what we can do with it. All right. So this is Scute House. Now what I'm seeing a 3-lander with the Prosperous Innkeeper, Dryad Survival, and most importantly, a Meathook Massacre in the opening hand. This is definitely keepable. So we have access to the Meathook Massacre in case we're going up against mono white. Oh, it looks like we're going up against green. Okay. Since we don't have a turn 1 play anyway, I'm going to play the Deathcap Glade. It's going to enter the battlefield tapped. And then turn 2, we're going to have a Prosperous Innkeeper live and online, which means turn 3, we can have a Stickfingers on 2. Elysian Caryatid. Okay, good card. I'm going to play out the Darkbore Pathway. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to play out the Forest. That way we don't have to commit to our pathway just yet. But we do have 2 pathways. One of them is going to be a black source for sure for this Meathook Massacre. Let's see. So our opponent here is playing the Elysian Caryatid, which is one of the best of one only. Ooh, In Search of Greatness is not a card I expected to see today. Not gonna lie, I'm kind of jazzed. It's not one of those you see every day. So I'm gonna throw the Prosperous Innkeeper here as well. It gives us an additional treasure token, which means next turn. So right now we have an opportunity to stick fingers on 1, which I'm not super jazzed about. I think I'm gonna wait on that. Let's see, do they get to cast anything with In Search of Greatness? They do. It's an Uvenwald Oddity. Goodness, that hurts. So the Old Growth Troll into an Uvenwald Oddity. I have a feeling we're about to get run over, which means Meathook next turn is for sure happening. I'm going to prevent 2 of the damage by putting Prosperous Innkeepers in front of it. Not super jazzed about that, but, well, what you going to do? All right, Storm the Festival is pretty great. I'm not mad to see it. Not mad to see it, but what we need to do here is a Meathook Massacre on 4. Which is going to wipe that board clean. Special thanks to those 2 treasure tokens that our Prosperous Innkeepers gave us. Cool, and we're going to gain 3 life, and our opponent is going to be sad, which is exactly what we needed. All right, Old Growth Troll now becomes an enchantment on the land. And Search of Greatness is just going to be a scry next turn, so if they are sitting on a 5-drop, they will not be able to take advantage of In Search of Greatness to put it down. Now, they sacrifice the land to create the Troll Warrior token, the 4/4. Okay, not mad at that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't love it, but at the same time, well, there's nothing I can do about it, so here we are. All right, time to hit Old Stickfingers on 3, which means we're going to put 3 creatures into our graveyard. We hit Old Stickfingers, a Scute Swarm, and another Prosperous Innkeeper, and additionally, we now have a 5/5 on board, which can stonewall that 4/4, which is exactly what we need. Now, they might have a Blizzard Brawl, but they only have 2 snow lands, which is definitely relevant here, because their other 2 lands are the Turn Timber, Serpentine, Wood. So if they do have a snow land, or if they do have Blizzard Brawl, rather, that will be ineffective. So that's nice. All right, now I think it's time to hit a Storm the Festival, Storm la Festable. And let's see, we hit a Wrenn and Seven, and we have an option for an Old Rutstein or a Scute Swarm. We can also hit a Scute Swarm and an Evolving Wilds, which is tempting, but I think it's Wrenn and Seven and Scutes. And we're going to +1 Wrenn. We're only going to get 1 land into our hand, but we're going to put a Celestus, a Scute Swarm, and another Old Stickfingers into our graveyard, and we are going to hold Sticky back. Sorry, I like to call Old Stickfingers Sticky. It just seems like a nice word. He and I go way back, so what can I say? All right. Circle of Dreams Druid. Interesting choice. Not a card I expected to see today. Glorious Sunrise. I'm not mad at that. However, the key piece that we haven't seen yet, that we desperately need, is the Dollhouse of Horrors. We haven't seen it in our graveyard. We haven't seen it in play. We haven't seen it at all, as a matter of fact. I'm going to throw the Ancient Greenwarden here. It's going to give us access to our graveyard, which is pretty rad. I'm then going to throw the Forest. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, why didn't I play the Field of Ruin there? I think now we start attacking with Sticky. I could have played out the Field of Ruin, but to be honest, I don't want to crack their Turn Timber Serpentine Wood here. Even though it does give us an additional land drop, it also gives them access to Blizzard Brawl potentially. And so that makes me a little bit nervous. But at the same time, actually, now that I'm looking at it, I think we're doing just fine. Averbrook Caretaker. All right, that's a card. I don't have any other words other than just that. That's a card. All right, Dollhouse of Horrors. Let's go. The time has come for the Scute House of Horrors. We activate that. We create a Scute Construct creature token. We're going to go ahead and hit Wrenn and Seven. Do we hit an Evolving Wilds? No, we do not. Unfortunate. Oh, well. And hit that. Scutes do Scute things. Ching, 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 ching. Let's go. And opponent scoops it up. Yep. I believe an attack all there would have done the job. All right. Perfect. Boom. One in the books. All right. So we have another 3-land hand, this time with Evolving Wilds in the opening hand. I do see the Meathook Massacre, which makes me a little bit happy. However, what I don't see is a green mana source or a lot of early plays, aside from the Meathook Massacre. So if we're going up against, like, Is It or some non-aggro deck, Meathook Massacre is not going to be worth much. Old Stickfingers isn't going to get us very far either. So the more I look at it, the more I'm talking myself out of this hand. Although Old Stickfingers into Dryad Survival could get us some goodies. Although the more I look at it, the less I like it. So let's mull that away. All right, this is much better. This is much better. I'm gonna let the Storm the Festival go. We're gonna have access to the Old Greenwarden and the Ancient Greenwarden rather, and Scute Swarm, which makes me super duper uber happy. I'm gonna throw the Evolving Wilds first. I would normally want to save the Evolving Wilds, but because we're on the play and we already had to mull down to 6, the chances of us hitting our land drops, I mean, we need to ensure we hit our land drops is really what it comes down to. And so this is gonna turn into a Forest. We're gonna throw the Darkbore Pathway down as the Darkbore Pathway, the black side. So much familiar. Okay, maybe I missed that. Maybe it's time for me to miss the Meathook Massacre. But Old Rutstein having 4 toughness is very real, so that's going to be helpful. Actually, I just realized in Crimson Vow, one of the draft archetypes is toughness matters in green black, and I just realized that Old Rutstein would actually fit into that deck quite nicely as a 1/4 for 3. Anyway, a little side note. All right, so Old Rutstein is going to do a good job of blocking these Stonebinders Familiar unless they follow this up with a Brutal Cathar or a Skyclave Apparition targeting Old Rutstein. If that comes down next, I'm going to be very sad because it's going to exile Old Rutstein, buff up both Stonebinders Familiars to 2/2s. There's that Brutal Cathar. I hate it when I'm right. All right, so yeah, so Old Rutstein's gone, unfortunately, and the Stonebinders Familiars are now 2/2s. Mild bummer, but not the end of the world. All right, so we have access to the Celestus here, but I think what I'm going to do is throw the Scute Swarm, followed by the Deathcap Glade. That way it creates an insect blocker, so we have a 1/1 chump blocker that we can, well, do with whatever. Next turn, we'll be able to throw the Ancient Greenwarden down. Portable Hole is going to be targeting the treasure token in all likelihood, or they target the insect token. Okay, fair enough. And the Skyclave Apparition is going to be going after Scutes. All right, fair enough, fair enough. I'm really hoping for a Meathook Massacre off the top. A Meathook Massacre off the top would be fantastic. It's probably not going to happen, but man, is it what we need. All right. Yep, not going to happen. Dope. All right, so I'm going to throw the Ancient Greenwarden here using the treasure token. This 5/7 blocker is relevant. It also gives us access to those Evolving Wilds, which if we still had our Scute Swarm would be really handy. But alas, because we no longer have the Scute Swarm, they are not in fact handy. Yeah, the fact that white has so many cards that are capable of adding to the board presence while removing your opponent, or like while removing their opponent's creatures, it's so good. Like, it's insanely good. If they attack with all here, we can block 3 of it. We're still dead. So if they attack with everything here, it's lethal, and we're tapped out. So there's no reason for them not to, but they choose not to. Well, I'm not mad at that. Slightly confused, but not mad at it. All right, so we're gonna throw Rutstein. He's gonna mill away at Dollhouse. But we don't have anything else in our graveyard anyway at this point, so it doesn't really matter. All right. The Ancient Greenwarden's going to hold back. I'm fairly confident we're still dead here if they choose to attack, which let's see if they do. So Skyclave Apparition going after Rutstein because the Ancient Greenwarden is too large to target. But at this point, because the Stonebinders Familiars are now 4/4s, I believe this is abundantly clear to anyone that attacking is the correct answer. Not to mention Adeline will also create an additional creature, which means if the Ancient Greenwarden steps in front of Adeline, which I kind of have to do, yeah, it's still not enough. Yeah, it would kill the Ancient Greenwarden was the final thought. So, okay, mono white, still very good, and definitely something where this deck is going to struggle. So that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Right. So here we have the Meathook Massacre in the opening hand alongside Scute, Celestus, and a Storm the Festival. Not an amazing opening hand, but it could be a whole heck of a lot worse. So worst case scenario, we hit Celestus on 3 into a Meathook Massacre on 4, which it looks like we're going up against mono red goblins, and that's exactly what we're going to have to do. The other option is to throw a Scute Swarm down on 3, and depending on where we're at life total wise, I may do that. We'll see. So the Goblin Javelineer, whenever a creature becomes blocked, deals 1 damage to the creature blocking it, which is pretty fantastic. So if we were to block it with a 1/1, say a Scute Swarm, then the Goblin Javelineer would kill it before combat damage could be dealt, which would be a problem. So Voltaic Visionary going to dome them for 2. They're going to hit a mountain off that, which is going to transform the Voltaic Visionary into the Volt Charge Berserker, which is a 4/3. All right. All right, so our opponent's getting aggro. Cool, bro. Chill out. We're good. Don't need to get aggro. Is that a dumb joke? Yes. Do I stand by it? Absolutely. All right, so they're going to play with fire all over our face. I don't love that. So Celestus here is hopefully going to gain us some life and give us some card selection throughout the course of this game. We'll see if that plays out. So 5/6. They have 6 damage represented on board. Fortunately, they didn't play anything for us, so it does become night here. So let's go ahead and take action. I'm going to go ahead and discard... I'm going to discard the Storm the Festival here. Prosperous Innkeeper could go a long way, but I think what I'm going to actually do is throw Glorious Sunrise and gain 3 life off of it. Next turn, we're going to be able... Well, actually, I probably should have discarded the Scute Swarm. They're going to braid the Celestus. That makes me sad. Makes me super sad, as a matter of fact. I think we can still work with Glorious Sunrise, though. They're going to continue to play with fire. I'm not overly happy about that. Glorious Sunrise is going to gain us some life. Hopefully hold off the assault long enough for us to set something up here. And so we also have the ability for Glorious Sunrise to gain... well, hopefully Glorious Sunrise survives. We'll see. Evolving Wilds. The Wilds. All right. So we can Meathook Massacre on 3 here. Oh, we can't. We don't have a black mana source because Celestus is gone. Poo. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw Scute Swarm. Followed shortly thereafter by an Evolving Wild. Well, no. I'm actually going to throw the Field of Ruin here. So we're going to create an insectile creature, if you will. They're going to Frostbite the Scute Swarm. But we still get a 1/1 blocker, and we're going to play out a Prosperous Innkeeper, which is going to give us another blocker for next turn. So we're going to be able to soak up a little bit of damage, hopefully. And Glorious Sunrise is going to continue to gain his life. You're going to braid the Innkeeper. That hurts. Don't like it. Do not like it. All right. I'm going to play with fire all over that insect token. Ouch, my face. Good thing for us that Prosperous Innkeeper gave us a treasure token, however. So the Dollhouse of Horrors is going to come down. We're going to use the treasure token to grab up a Scute Swarm. Doodly doodly doot. And then crack an Evolving Wilds. And it's going to go grab a black source. So we're going to have access to the Meathook Massacre next turn. Plus, we have 4/4s on board. Booyah. We're going to gain a little bit of life. Boom. Let's go. That Faceless Haven would have been really good had it come into play last turn, but it did not. And they choose not to attack with anything. Groovy. I'll take it. All right. Dollhouse of Horrors is going to trigger. We're going to grab up the Prosperous Innkeeper. Ba-boom. Let's go. and they scoop it up. So what was going to happen, the Dollhouse of Horrors was going to grab the Prosperous Innkeeper, then we were going to throw the Deathcap Glade into a Storm the Festival. And from there, all of our creatures were going to get trampled because of the Glorious Sunrise. It was going to get gross. And so our opponents saw it. They saw that they ran out of gas. Our Glorious Sunrise gave us exactly the amount of life that we needed to hang on, and we got in for the win. Feels good. Feels good. So that's the Scute Swarm deck. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for enjoying this little trip. And if you did enjoy this particular video, please don't hesitate to like and subscribe. They make a huge difference to the channel. And also, of course, tell a friend. So thank you so much for hanging out. You can also catch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/HamHocks42. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a phenomenal day. Catch you on the next one.